get to know more about our history, shared history.
Of course, yes, absolutely. There's so much still to talk about
Yeah.
in regard, and it's never ending. It can always
Yeah.
also be seen from different points of view.
Mm.
The important thing is that we keep collaborating in this because
Mm-mm.
in the end, it's our legacy, it's our heritage,
Yeah.
We're live now.
common heritage.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we keep doing this, younger generations and everybody will certainly get more involved and recognize this this heritage that from the past to both our countries, to both our cultures,
Mm-hmm.
to find those places,
Yeah.
meeting places, which are a lot, so many that we don't even process it in language, in food, in religion, in so many things. No, you'll see a little bit of that in the presentation.
Okay. Okay.
Amba, should we
Sure.
begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Es un gusto saludarles de nuevo.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Amba, we'll begin. We're live now on YouTube. So good evening from Mexico City. Good morning, good afternoon to all of our participants from all over the world. And welcome to the 6th episode of La Historia Olvidada, Filipinas, Mexico 2025. Before we begin, I'd like to lay out some gentle house rules and reminders to our participants. We would like to kindly request that all video cameras and microphones of participants in Zoom be disabled throughout the program and presentation. After our speaker's presentation, we'll have an open forum wherein everyone is encouraged to ask questions or provide their comments. Participants may also state or write their questions in the chat box here in Zoom or in YouTube. Participants are also invited to fill out the evaluation form, which will be shared at the end of the session. With that said, I'd like to call on Her Excellency Lilibet R. Diapera, Ambassador of the Philippines to Mexico, to deliver her welcome remarks. Ma'am?
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. To all our participants from different offices and universities in the Philippines and Mexico, members of the Diplomatic Corps, colleagues from other Philippine Foreign Service posts, Philippine honorary consuls, members of the Filipino communities under our jurisdiction, those who are joining us via our YouTube channel, dear friends and colleagues at the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, good evening, good morning, and welcome to the 6th episode of La Historia Olvidada, Filipinas, Mexico 2025. On behalf of the Embassy of the Philippines in Mexico, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest speaker for tonight's episode, Dr. Roberto Junco, archaeologist from the Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, Mexico, who will share with us his fascinating work on Manila Galleon archaeology in Mexico. My sincere appreciation also goes to Dr. Ivan Valdez-Bubnov of Philippine-Mexico Studies Program based in UNAM for his invaluable support as our co-organizer of this evening's episode. Thank you, Dr. Ivan, for your collaboration and friendship. For the benefit of our new participants, this initiative, in collaboration with the University of the Philippines, Diliman, El Colegio de San Luis, and the Philippine-Mexico Studies Program based at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, was launched in October 2023 with the aim to highlight pivotal events and contexts that have shaped the engagements between the Philippines and Mexico, spanning from the 16th century to the contemporary period. It also aims to foster deeper academic, diplomatic, and cultural exchanges between the Philippines and Mexico, while highlighting the significance of the Manila-Acapulco galleons in forging ties and paving the way for early global trade. Tonight is especially meaningful for me. This will be the final episode that I will host as the Philippine Ambassador to Mexico, as I will be retiring and concluding my tour of duty this month. Since the series began in 2023 with Dr. Paulina Machuca, who gave an overview of Philippine-Mexico ties, including cultural and gastronomic connections like tuba, we've journeyed through a range of rich topics. We explored maritime heritage, Mexican meats in Pampanga, Southeast Asian cuisine in Guerrero, and the Philippines during the Baroque era, port defense, genetic exchanges across the Pacific, and the circulation of Asian art in New Spain. We have learned also about shared religious traditions, Our Lady of Guadalupe's shared devotion, Chinese migration, shared agricultural goods, the famous Murillo Velarde map, Cavite's heritage role, and the Philippine artifacts housed in Mexican museums. This year, we delve into Filipino migration and its legacy in Mexico, early diplomacy with Japan, culinary exchanges showing Mexico's influence on Filipino food and vice versa, visual art as a tool for negationism, and similarities in weaving traditions between the Philippines and Mexico. As you can see, we've really had a very wide and diverse discussions on a lot of topics. Each episode has revealed the depth of our cultural and historical connections formed over centuries and still relevant today. To all our speakers, partners, and participants, thank you for joining us on this journey of memory, dialogue, and connection. It has been a great honor to serve and to help promote the enduring friendship between our two nations. Let us now listen to Dr. Junco and uncover yet another chapter of our shared past. Maraming salamat po. Muchas gracias a todos. Mabuhay ang pagkakaibigan ng Pilipinas at Mexico.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Diapera. I'd like to call now Ms. Asa Abulok, Cultural Officer of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, to introduce our resource speaker for today's session. Ms. Asa?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Our speaker for tonight's episode is an archaeologist, as the ambassador has mentioned, who graduated from Mexico's National School of Anthropology and History, where he studied a master's and doctorate's degree in archaeology. He received a diploma in historical archaeology from the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom. He is currently an affiliated scholar of the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, member of the Society for Historical Archaeology, and a board member of AQUA. Since 2017, he has overseen the underwater archaeology of Mexico's history, started working in 2004. Among the projects he has directed are underwater archaeology in the volcano Nevado de Toluca, Manila Galleon in Baja California, maritime archaeology at the port of Acapulco, and underwater archaeology in Villarica. Among his academic interests are the archaeology of Manila galleons and navigation in colonial times. Let us all welcome Dr. Roberto Junco Sanchez. You may now have the floor.
Thank you, Ariadne. Thank you, Ambassador, for your kind words. What I'm going to talk today about is the archaeology of Manila galleons. So mostly in these excellent conferences that we've been hearing for the past year and more, we touch upon a lot of very interesting aspects of the Manila galleon, such as historical research, anthropological research, but we have not yet heard about material culture, the archaeology part of the Manila galleons. So this is a topic that I've been working on for 20 years now. My thesis as a master and a PhD had to do specific with this topic of developing this archaeology, which in many ways it was already being done in the Philippines. I think it's the first place where it started with the excavation of the San Diego, for example, but also to some of the excellent research in near the Pasig River, Intramuros, Binondo, and all the different areas around Manila. As well in the USA with the exploration of certain Manila galleons in California, or some of the work in the Mariana Islands. But so basically what I've been trying to push is for an archaeology of Manila galleons, where most of the archaeologists that are working on these topics, we get together to input into this trade route that lasted for 250 years, as you know. And this material approach can tell us things that sometimes the documents cannot tell us. It can tell us things that are lost to the anthropological expressions of today, for example, and that are testimony of what the Manila galleon was, right? but from this perspective that I was telling you. Let me change my slide. So if we look around today in the Philippines, in Mexico, in the Mariana Islands, and even further, the expressions of this trade route are everywhere. No? For example, here we find a little plate of Chinese porcelain inside of Agua Bendita, a pile in Oaxaca. So this is a place to put the holy water in an old convento, convent in Oaxaca. Or, for example, this nice pulpito or pulpit where the priest says mass in a very small town in Tlaxcala, and it has a Japanese screen decorating it. Or in the clothing of the priests in several churches, the historic textiles that survive, or this excellent painting, an ex voto of one of the Manila galleons. So the expressions are everywhere, in buildings, in churches, and this is material evidence of the galleon. As you all know, and we've heard in many of the talks already, the galleon transported quite a bit of goods from Asia to America. No, so from all the countries in Southeast Asia, there were the spices, there was the textiles from India, the textiles from China, the porcelains from China, the ivories, all these sent wood boxes, lacquers, all kinds of beautiful objects that traveled through the Pacific all the way to America. And of course, in Asia, arrived all this silver being produced in Mexico and some in Peru, of course, no, in Potosí. In the 16th century, a lot of this silver from South America reached Asia. All this American silver is going across to purchase all these goods. So what can an archaeology of Manila galleons be like? What subjects can we study or explore doing this archaeology? What influences in culture, the technologies involved, for example, the ships and the local changes in the technology to make it better, no? The interactions, the dynamics, all these are things that pertain to this archaeology. So in the first place, of course, the ships, the vehicles, the technology that made this exchange possible. And these ships have a very curious and interesting story. The first ships, of course, and we'll see it in a little bit, are built here in Mexico. No? Soon, ships begin to be built in Central America. All these fantastic tropical woods and stuff. But then by the 1580s, 1590s, the shipbuilding goes to Asia, and in the Philippines they find excellent wood. They make they have access to excellent metals to incorporate into the ships, and textiles, of course. And so the production shifts to Asia. There are some galleons that we know that have been sunk and that have been studied, or at least partially, such as the Baja California galleon that we've been exploring for over 25 years now, with a ceramic collection, metals, many other materials, with archaeological reports and publications. The San Agustin in Drakes Bay, California, from 1595. But by the way, the Manila galleon in Baja California is thought to be from the 1570s, so it's an early galleon of the route. The San Agustin of 1595 in Drakes Bay, California. Not yet found, but fragments of porcelain and wax show up in the beach and in some of the indigenous graves and sites around the area, mainly studied by National Park Service. Of course, the San Diego in Manila, which is probably the first and greatest excavation of a Manila galleon, the San Diego of 1600, found with ceramic collection, metals, many other materials, some archaeological reports and books. This galleon, of course, you can visit the collection in the National Museum of the Philippines that worked along with Frank Godio on it. Then the Santa Margarita in Rota of 1601, a fantastic collection with archaeological reports, although it was also a commercial operation. Nuestra Señora de la Concepción of 1638 in Saipan, treasure hunted, also a commercial operation, publication and archaeological report. Nuestra Señora del Pilar, 1619, Guam, not really well studied yet. I think it's one of the places where I would love to have the Filipino and Japanese and American archaeologists working together to study further this site. There's some of the stone of the ballast in there and little pieces, but really not that much archaeology yet done. And probably the Santo Cristo de Burgos of 1694, or could be the San Francis Xavier that was lost in the coast of Oregon in the US as well, and that has been yielding quite a bit of materials in the beach, like especially wax. So it's also called the wax wreck, a very interesting shipwreck site. So these are a few of the possible archaeological sites that have been studied so far. Beside the ships, there's also been the excavations on land of the ports and the facilities that were part of the route. So as I told you before, there's been all these wonderful excavations in the Philippines, in Manila. There's also these excavations that we've done in Acapulco that I'll be talking a little bit more about. And another point that's quite interesting is what interaction did local populations have with this route. So beyond the Spanish Empire, beyond the people in Manila that were part of this trade route, or the people in Mexico City specifically, and Acapulco that had to do with the galleon. What other interactions were there? And so we get that, for example, from wrecks in the Mariana Islands, the islanders would get these gold chains from the passengers and just leave them hanging on trees. Or, for example, in Oregon, there's stories that survive through the indigenous people of red-haired people, foreigners that came in and mixed with the local populations. Or, for example, in Baja California, we've found some arrowheads fashioned out of porcelain instead of stone. And so these interactions between these indigenous groups in the Philippines, in the Mariana Islands, in the coast of America, it's also an interesting topic to do archaeology on, because often we find pieces of the galleons, in indigenous sites. So just to go back into the history of all of this, let's set ourselves in 1521, the fall of the great city of Tenochtitlan, and the Spanish conquerors, along with their indigenous allies, because this was not a conquest of Spanish against Indians, as we're often told, but rather of Indians conquering Indians, no? And the Spaniards are just there as part of the cohort that fights against the Mexicas or the Aztecs. So once this takes place and a whole new era starts, a new government is set up, all these different customs introduced, all the indigenous elites becoming part of this new society. Hernán Cortés continues to realize the dream of Columbus of reaching Asia, to have this direct connection. So he starts preparing expeditions. He starts building ships in the Pacific. And while this is happening, of course, there's the very famous trip of Magellan. This book is actually a book that I used to read when I was a little 7-year-old kid. And when I learned about Magellan and his trip around the world, with Juan Sebastián Elcano, of course, being the one that finishes the trip. So this is happening at the same time as Tenochtitlan is falling. It's interesting, the intensity of change and of that's happening in the same time in this 16th century that's so dynamic it's so dynamic that it's difficult to actually understand it because so many big things are happening. And one of the early things that Cortés makes when he is already in control of Mexico City is prepare an expedition and send a letter to the king of Tidore, one of the islands in the Maluka Islands, just south of Mindanao in Indonesia today, asking about any of the survivors of the wrecks that had happened in these first expeditions to Asia, because as you know, the expeditions at first managed to get to Asia. Álvaro de Saavedra, who was a cousin of sobrino of Cortés, no, related to Cortés, Jofre de Loaiza, these early expeditions, they managed to get all the way to Asia. Magellan, of course, being the first one that crosses the Pacific, but they cannot return. So imagine in the 20s, we have these amazing expeditions crossing the Pacific Ocean, arriving to their objective, which is the Spice Islands. Spice was all they really wanted at that moment. It was such a thing that was wanted in Europe. But they cannot return. So it takes many years, 40-something years, till in the expedition of Legazpi, Urdaneta manages to do the Tornaviaje. And we've talked about this in this Historia Olvidada, no? But just to remember a little bit. But what I wanted to center a little bit is more than that is that the ships, these early ships, are very small at first. They're quite small, and an interesting work that we did, academic work that we did, was that we found a document from 1535. So, as I told you, Tenochtitlan falls in 1521. The expedition of Magellan by Elcano arrives in 1521 after going around the world. And in 1535, so this is like 13 years, 14 years after, Cortés is building these 3 ships in the Pacific, the Santiago, San Lázaro, Santa Águeda. And these ships, he wants to explore the coasts of America, wants to trade with Peru. So they're very small ships, 40-ton, 80-ton. Well, we have a 1564, 400-ton ships. So we see that by the end of the 16th century, the ships are much larger, no? The San Felipe of 89 is 700, Pintados 91, 600, San Agustin, well, a little smaller, but Santana, Santiago, 600. So very fast, the ships get larger and larger and larger. Let us remember that the way they were calculating the tonnage, because today ton is 1,000 kilos. But back then, what they were really talking about was about a cubic measurement, the capacity of the ship to take cargo in, basically. And that's how so when they're talking about tonnage, they're talking about this volume of the hold of the ship, of what they can carry. So it was very interesting in this document by the ships of Cortés was building. There was a shipwright from Venice. The measurements are in Portuguese measurements. So there was a Portuguese somewhere around there and a Spanish. So if we think that in the 1531 or something, there's a Venetian shipwright and a Portuguese one building ships to cross the Pacific. It's happening, everything so fast, and there's all these cultural exchanges that are happening. And those in this document, actually the measurements are in Portuguese measurements, but they're all talking about this same thing, this cubic capacity. So here's the conversion of some of the measurements in this document that allowed us to reconstruct these first ships by Cortés. So very early on, they're putting great efforts to cross the Pacific. And of course, they find lots of islands on the way. They start getting a sense of the vastness, but also of all the possibilities in the Pacific, and arriving in in the Philippines. So you know the story very well. The first settlement is in Cebu, but soon they find that Manila Bay and the area in Manila is much better. And basically, the really intelligent, smart thing that happens there is that they basically find the best place to insert themselves into an already existing network of commerce, a very elaborate commerce that's been going for centuries. And Manila is basically becomes the hub, the center of this Asian commerce. And in the other side, Acapulco and Mexico City, also the hub for the American continent, the Caribbean, and to Europe. So this is the importance that all of a sudden we got these two nodal points connected that are themselves connected to so many places. And this is part of the greatness and the richness of our route. So Manila becomes this important city in an already existing commercial exchange route. And very soon people start arriving there from all these different parts in Asia to become part of this trading activity. No? Same happens with Mexico City. So let's go back a little bit to the Manila galleons of the 16th and 17th century. This one is from the 17th century. So very soon, by the end of the 16th century, they're built in the Philippines. By the 17th century, also, no, a few outside of the Philippines, in Cambodia and India, but these are anomalies. In reality, it's in the Philippines they're building these ships. In Mexico City, by 1580s. Diego Garcia Palacio publishes in Mexico the first time that ever somebody published plans for ships. These are the plans of Diego Garcia Palacio for ships to sail the Pacific Ocean. So in the 1580s, in the Mexican imprint, in the Mexican print house, one of the Mexican print house, we have this treatise on navigation and shipbuilding for ships made in the to traverse the Pacific Ocean. So it becomes very fast that this route takes on quite an importance. And we have our first Manila galleon that wrecks, probably. There's other ones, but this is the one that we know for sure, that we have the material evidence, the archaeological evidence, so to speak, and is the Baja California Manila galleon. No? So this is a reconstruction done by Ackerman, good friends of Van der Porten, who was the one that initiated this project here in Mexico. And it's a actually very nice reconstruction of a ship of that time. And this is what this site looks like today. It's a beach in the middle of nowhere. There's no trees, there's no plants, it's just dunes. And along these dunes, you start walking, and along 11 kilometers, you start finding a little piece of porcelain here. Maybe 200 meters later, you find a stoneware from Vietnam. And maybe then 1 kilometer away, you find a Spanish coin. So it's a site that's very, 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 very large. It's 11 kilometers. And every time the sand moves, which is moving all the time, little bits of the wreck appear. And for example, in regards to the ship, we have all the lead sheeting. They used to put lead on the hull of the ship to preserve the wood from the teredo navalis, the worm wood eating woods, the wood-eating worms. Sorry, and some of the metal spikes, for the construction of the ship, but also part of the cargo is what we find. And of course, we've done some of the research on the water, and with magnetometers, we've been able to detect very, very clearly where the major anomalies, which tell us that there's large chunks of metal there, could be the anchors, maybe some cannons, are located. But it's right where the waves hit, so it's very difficult to actually be able to excavate underwater, under the sand, underwater, and reach several meters. But someday we will, no? So it's lying there. So this is one of the excavations on land, the testing pits, where we find all the different elements from the wreck. And we find lots of interesting pieces, like, for example, this bronze incense cover, or Chinese bronze mirrors, or a Chinese coin, for example. So very interesting metal things. And of course, the ceramics, no, which is the majority of the collection and resist very good the time. And this project started in 2000, and it's been going on for this long. And it's a site that every year that we go yields more information. And of course, one day we'll be able to research underwater and get to probably part of the hull, if God willing. It'd be a wonderful thing. So there's publications, documentaries about this. This was the earliest project of the Manila Galleons in Mexico that we started in the office in the year 2000, 25 years ago. And of course, no, some of the items are very well conserved. No, these polychrome. You can still see very clearly the colors on these ceramic pieces. And as I was telling you, archaeology differs from history or from anthropology, and we find amazing evidences. For example, this cloisonné plate. So this is a technique that was developed in Byzantium a 1,000 years ago or so, and traveled through the Silk Route all the way to China. And then in China, they started making this, and they still do it all the way to today. But if you look in the documents for the Manila Galleon, there's not a single mention of this type of product crossing the Pacific. But archaeologically, we find it. So now we know we can add to the list of items that traveled the cloisonné. No? And these are partial reconstructions of two. We have two of these plates. Out of very small remains, we were able to propose this reconstruction. We don't have the center, unfortunately. And we do some of analysis. What are the compositions, the chemical compositions, the elemental compositions of the pigments, etc. No? Or, for example, this is part of a compass. This is the gimbal of the compass, which is what makes the compass be always horizontal to the horizon, so that the instrument can always measure correctly the direction, right? So this is a European mechanic instrument for the compass, no, for the direction of the ship, for the navigation, the correct navigation of the ship. So wonderful things like that survive. Or this wax, which, of course, in the documents there's a little bit of mention of wax, but archaeologically we're finding that wax was a very big thing in the Manila Galleon trade. Because in Oregon we find it, here in Baja California we find it, and these are shipwrecks that are over 100 years separated in time. And you can only think about this wax because we've done the research, and it's Southeastern Asian wax. Why would they bring so much wax? Was this like a more special kind of wax for candles? Remember that everything was candles back then. Did it smell better? Did it last longer? What were the characteristics of bringing this wax across the Pacific? So, as I'm telling you, this archaeology also poses new questions, no, that have to be answered, new avenues of inquiry, and that's why the archaeology of Manila Galleons brings important information into the picture. And this is a magnetometer. This is basically how you pass the magnetometer through the water, and then you all of a sudden you see anomalies, magnetic anomalies, and these refer to metal objects. No, so this is the technique being used, and someday we'll be able to reach this ship. So that's been going for 25 years now. But going a little bit back, 20 years ago, in 2005, when I was doing my master's thesis, I started looking into a site north of Acapulco, near Cihuatanejo, where there were lots of little pieces of porcelain, and my idea at first was, oh my God, there must be a Manila galleon sunk near the coast over there or something. So I started doing my research on that, and I found a lot of little pieces of porcelain, along with Mayolica. Mayolica, as you know, is a European technology that comes from the Arabs, and it's a glazed ceramic that's good to put water and other things inside. And this specific style of Mayolica is known to have been produced in New Spain in the 16th and first half of the 17th century. Not longer than that, but nobody really knew where it came from. So back in 2005, while I was doing this, we started doing composition analysis of the pastes, and it started to yield us information. And then we learned, using this technique, neutron activation analysis, that these Mayolicas, Romitas graphitos, were being produced in Michoacan. And it was very interesting. We went to Michoacan, we found some of this type of ceramic, we find some Chinese porcelains as well. And looking at the place where these were found is very close to the Rio Balsas, which is the frontier between Guerrero and Michoacan. And this is a very large, important river that goes to the highlands of Michoacan from the coast. So my proposal in my thesis was that there was a trade going on between Michoacan and the coast for the Manila galleon products. But how interesting, no? The documents tell us that all the merchandise was supposed to arrive in Acapulco. And what is this? What are these pieces doing 300 kilometers north of Acapulco, no? So the proposal is that we're talking about smuggling, which was known to have been a very constant thing, and that before arriving into Acapulco, some of the cargo was unloaded, and it was going to Michoacan, no, because we're finding the Michoacan Mayolicas in the same area. So that was pretty much my thesis back in 2005. And this all fueled my interest more and more on the Manila galleon archaeology. So what else can we find that's related to the Manila galleon if we don't have any other wrecks known up to this day in our waters? Oh, certainly we should look at the buildings, at the places where this ship passed through, no? So in this map you can see Zacatula that I was telling you, a little dotted line all the way to Pátzcuaro in Michoacan, and that was the route that they were taking to smuggle products, and just to make them arrive earlier than going all the way first to Mexico City, paying taxes, and then to Michoacan. And so we started working near there in Zihuatanejo. We did the magnetometry, trying to find some ships. This was my doctoral thesis, and these were ships that were sank there by an English pirate in the 18th century, Lord George Anson, who captured some ships in Peru. And before going to Asia to capture the Manila galleon, because he was really interested in capturing the Manila galleon, he sank these 3 ships. And we found some nice anomalies of where these ships could be. There's also been some ceramics, like this botija, big botija, and an anchor. Here you can see this anchor in Zihuatanejo that pertains to one of these Spanish vessels captured by Lord Anson on his way to Asia, where he captures the Covadonga, one of the Manila galleons, and takes then to London what they call the greatest treasure, or something like that, no? Basically, they capture a ship full of silver going inbound to the Philippines, and then takes it to London. Today in Zihuatanejo, we've done also this exhibiting place where people can learn more about the Manila galleon and the role that Zihuatanejo played on the Manila galleon trade route, because this was one of the places from where one of the expeditions, the early expeditions that we talked about, departed. Also the place where Anson burns some of the Spanish ships before capturing the Manila galleon in the 18th century. And this is a model of the San Pedro, which was the first ship to actually come back with Urdaneta. And the view behind is an engraving by Anson in his famous book of the coast of Zihuatanejo. So, and this actually happened. The San Pedro passed through that coast on its way to Acapulco with Urdaneta on the first trip in 1565. So you can visit this in Zihuatanejo if you are there. So many years later, another place that was interesting pertaining to the Manila galleons was San Blas, because San Blas in the 18th century becomes, during the Bourbon period, it becomes, and the Bourbons start making the government very rational and planning everything. And so they make this naval department to explore the northern part of the American continent and to protect the Pacific coast and protect the Manila galleon trade. So we went to San Blas to see what we could find related to the galleons. Some galleons in the 18th century were sailed from San Blas, so San Blas had some connection. And again, here is what the documents do not tell you, but that archaeology can sometimes tell you. When we started collecting the materials in the surface, in the Contaduría, which was a building specifically for all kinds of the materials of the ships, no, for the repairing of the ships, etc. We started finding different kinds of ceramics, a Chinese coin as well. And what was very interesting is that we found quite a bit of early porcelain. So this was 16th century porcelain, a lot of it. And basically what we saw is that they were also smuggling porcelain in San Blas in the 16th century. And this because they were taking it to Guadalajara. So in the first case is to Michoacán, in this case is via Tepic to Guadalajara. But San Blas then takes on a different history because it also played a role in the 16th century and not only in the 18th as it's mostly said, no? And throughout this period, we started collecting information, all places where there's, for example, Chinese porcelain. And this distribution, once you plot it in a map like this, you find it all the way to Santa Fe, which was the northernmost point in the Camino Real, which is now in the USA, of course, but back then was part of New Spain. And all over the place you're finding it. So this allows you to see the distribution of the products of the galleon in New Spain and all the way to Panama and to Havana to go also to the Caribbean and to Europe. So very interesting how all these products of the galleon are being utilized, bought and used all over New Spain, no? And of course, if we were going to be doing an archaeology of Manila galleons, one place we could not stop doing excavation was, of course, Acapulco. So at some point in 2015, a friend of mine tells me, listen, we're doing some repair work in the fort of San Diego in Acapulco, and we found some shards that you might be interested in. And I was, okay, don't touch anything. And next day I was there in Acapulco, and we were excavating in the fortress of San Diego, and all of a sudden we found a lot of interesting archaeological materials. So this fort, of course, was built in the 1615 to 1617. It was attacked by the Dutch in an early phase of the fort in 1614 and then in 1624. And then an earthquake destroys the fort and a new one is built, which is the one that you can actually see now in this star-shaped, a very, very interesting, beautiful building. It was part of also the independence movement. It was sieged by Morelos for 2 years. The people resisted in there and then eventually surrendered, and then it was taken. So it has a very interesting story. It was attacked by the French in the 19th century. So we started doing archaeology there. So I put up a project and that continues up to this day. And basically we started working in what was the trash pit of the fort, where they would throw all kinds of things. And amazing objects that pertain to daily life in the fort started appearing. We also investigated underwater, the water system of the fort and different parts of the structures, doing archaeological excavations. And many, of course, of the objects pertain to military life, no? Because after all, it was a fort, and there's bullets from all periods of time. There's how do you call the little stone that makes the spark so that the powder goes off, no? The flint, the stones, but also other objects of daily life like bottles and food items like from the sea, like fish, bones, and conches. Of course, coins. In archaeology, you always find coins, Spanish period coins, independence movement coins, 19th century and 20th century, of course. No, one interesting aspect is that everything we did in the fort, we were finding all objects pertaining to after the earthquake. So we weren't we weren't excavating in the places where the evidence of the 17th and 16th century fortress was. So this is something that we're still looking for. But while we're doing that, all of a sudden in Acapulco, there were works of putting waterways and different kinds of government infrastructure projects. And in the downtown, in the center, all of a sudden we start finding a huge amount of porcelain shards, but a huge amount, over 7,000 shards of porcelain. We would go and pick up the porcelains from the people constructing this infrastructure. So they had a price, like if they gave us a nice big bag, we would give them a 2-liter Coca-Cola bottle, so that it wouldn't get lost, because this was going very fast. And so we managed to collect a really nice collection of porcelains and ceramics from downtown Acapulco, and specifically in the area where the Acapulco Fair used to take place. So every time the galleon would arrive, before anything, the authorities would collect the taxes, make an inventory, and then the objects, the boxes and everything could be unloaded, and the Acapulco Fair happened. No? So merchants from Mexico City and elsewhere would arrive, even from Peru, would arrive with their mules full of silver in exchange for all these wonderful goods. And so we started finding all these things, and very interesting questions arose. Like, for example, this little piece of porcelain among the 7,000 to 8,000 pieces. All of a sudden, I realized that this guy called Shang Wo Lao, and this is one of the immortals, one of the 8 immortals, no? And then my question was, what would this have meant for somebody in New Spain in the 18th century, no? For the person that produced this object, it's a very clear reference to a religious good omen, good luck, immortal being. But for the person that's consuming it, and then that just started to become a really interesting question about translating culture among countries, or the meaning of objects in different contexts. Sometimes it's just untranslatable, ununderstandable. And many cases like that, we found pieces where, for example, we get Renaissance motifs, like, for example, this head with these flowers coming out of the mouth, and this is Renaissance thematics in 16th century Chinese porcelain. How is this traveling? Or, for example, this piece, which is quite interesting, and what it is part of a cup where they are celebrating the arrival in the throne of Ferdinand VII in 1808. And so somebody commissions in Mexico City, oh, I want to have some porcelain cups to celebrate the king. So they send the order in the Manila Galleon, probably of 1808. It goes all the way from Manila to the production center of this, probably Canton, and they send back all these little pieces with the monogram of Ferdinand VII. And hello, Ferdinand VII is gone. He's been ousted by the independence movement, no? So they probably jet it out, like it's no longer our king. And then a few years, he actually gets back the crown, no? But interesting objects like this started appearing. And many other research questions arise from this. Like, for example, why would you have from the same period a plate like in the left where it represents deer in the park, It looks more like pigs, but it's actually deer in the park. And in the center, you have this beautiful deer in the park. So the range in quality, what is this telling you? If you have the same motif and one is suchly finely painted and the other one is so poorly painted, well, it also opens questions about who buys these porcelains. No? So it's not only the viceroy or the main people in society, but a whole bunch of people are consuming these things. So maybe it's not a nice plate, but it's still Chinese porcelain. And maybe the very rich person really buys the really nice one with the nice. No? Here's another example of this. No, the deer in the park and this other deer in the park. You see the difference in quality is abysmal. No, so it tells us about this range of and you have all these deer in between. No, some nicer than the other. And this probably was part of the price of these objects. Many of these also we found that we were finding the same plate almost done in the same workshop, repeated. And for example, here we have through different pieces, we actually proposed that there were 7, 8, 9 different of the same plate, which opens up a question. Why is 7 plates of these broken in the same place? And this is because when they opened the boxes in Acapulco for the fair, the pieces were broken already, so they just jet them out, no, and just conserve the ones that did not break. And that's why we're getting that. So that's how we figure out that we were actually recuperating the objects from the very place where the fair took place, which is also logical because it's right downtown in front of between the church and the sea, no? And for example, these big bowls is also the same thing. It's the same motif repeated. Here, there's differences, but not that big, but you're finding the same. And not only with the porcelains, but also with the mayolicas that we already talked a little bit about. We're finding mayolicas from all over Mexico. Here you have in little dots, production centers of mayolica. And in Acapulco, we're finding from all these places. So this tells us that there were people traveling from all these places to the fair to buy the products of the galleon. No? So this is tangible evidence of that. Of course, there's the glazed ceramics, some that have the shapes of the prehispanic ceramics, but glazed, and some that are totally European glazed motifs. Also, we found in the excavations prehispanic, of course, and locally fashioned ceramics. No, this red clay is from very local source, and they're doing both the European forms and also the prehispanic forms. And then all these little things of daily life, like belt buckles and little parts of decoration and rings and so on. Of course, the botijas, which were like the Coca-Cola bottles of the time, they were the product, the shape and the form where they used to transport the wine, the olives. They're called oliveras because of that, and they're very common. And you can actually see where they come from, if they're from the American continent or from Europe. But these traveled widely in ships, and of course carrying water, wine, olives, and other things. No, they're very common to find in shipwrecks. And also these stonewares, marbatans from Myanmar, Vietnam, the south of China. And these also important containers for rice, for water, because they're very good to hold liquids. No? And these were where the sailors used to take their water and their food across those 6 months that the trip lasted. No? And then, of course, 19th century ceramics, no? The British ceramics. So we started doing some ground penetrating radar to find the old fort. And in this little diagram, you have the new 5-star shaped fort, and then in blue, the old fort. So we haven't been able to find much of it yet. Also, some of the walls we've found places, but this is part of one of the elements of the old fort that we've located. No, so there's still much more work that needs to be done, And by the way, you can visit the Fort of San Diego and see the exhibit that Dr. Ivan and myself curated, and where you can get a nice feel for the history of Acapulco, the galleon trade, etc. No? I invite everybody to see this exhibit. We're preparing a virtual site where you can visit the exhibit. And so all these objects excavated, now you can see them in nice boxes with light and everything. And so you can enjoy a little bit of the history of Acapulco through this exhibit. So again, with this trade going on, many of the objects were actually lost in translation. This is a really interesting piece also. It's called the Lanting, so it's the Orchid Pavilion. A friend of mine, the archaeologist Tsuko Miyata from Japan, was the one that actually told me what it was. I didn't know what it was until she told me. And this is something that was very common to paint in paintings or in fans or in many objects. So it was very common in the Ming Dynasty, this Lanting theme, and it represents a 4th century, of the 4th century, 300 and something event that happened where the scholars have this meeting, and it's a very fun meeting because they put little cups in the river and they have alcohol inside, and if the cup gets to the near you, you have to drink it and compose a poem. And so of course, after a few hours, all the poets are drunk probably, and they each write their poems. But these poems did not survive. What survived was the introduction that one of these poets did for the book. Is the famous Chinese poem tells that in the year 353, during the Jin Dynasty, the great Chinese poet and calligrapher Wang Shishi. Calligrapher is very important because it's like a painter. It's not only doing letters, it's also like a painting, like a painter. It's one of the great arts. Gathered with other literati at the Orchid Pavilion to celebrate the spring purification ritual. They wrote 37 poems, and Wang wrote Lanting Shu as a preface to the work. The beauty of this poem, with its bucolic setting, Epicurean ambience, and existing philosophy, became one of China's most admired calligraphic works as well. So not only was the information there, but the way that it was rendered, the calligraphy, is one of the most famous calligraphy examples in Chinese culture. So it's really interesting that this story was represented after more than 1,000 years in a bowl of blue and white porcelain manufactured in Jindazheng at the end of the Ming Dynasty. It made its way to the coast of China and embarked to Manila, from where it traveled in the Manila galleon to the port of Acapulco. In that trip, it changed meaning completely, because once it arrived in Manila, there could have been some sanglé that understood exactly what it was. But then once it arrived to Acapulco, probably nobody understood what this was, no? But during excavations in 2016 in downtown Acapulco, archaeologists uncovered this fragment among thousands of Chinese porcelain with this theme of Lanting. And when you read this preface, it's amazing because it's like you're reading an existential writer, French writer of the 1960s, no? The meaning of these words that are over 1,000 years is incredible. So I'm just going to read a little bit. I don't know if my time, I think I'm taking too much time, but let me just read one of the parts of this script. It says, I am often moved by ancient sentimental lines which lamented the swiftness and uncertainty of life. When future generations look back to my time, it will probably be similar to how I now think of the past. What a shame. Therefore, when I list out the people that were here and record their musings, even though times and circumstances will change, as for the things that we regret, they are the same. For the people who read this in the future generations, perhaps you will likewise be moved by my words. Wow. So when I read this, and this is just a very, very little fragment, but the whole text is just incredibly existential, no? How sad. And other fragments which are not decorated or anything, they also tell us a lot of things. For example, this cup is part of one of these chocolate cups. And you can only think, who drank from this cup? Who would have drank from this cup if this cup had not broken in Acapulco and would have traveled to Mexico City? What would have been for these people that we can see represented in a painting, no? That were the people that lived in the 18th century? What would it been to have drank their chocolate on a Chinese porcelain cup, no? So these are the questions that archaeology brings forth and that are fascinating. And of course, in the end, the archaeology of Manila galleons, what it wants to do is to understand these exchanges, no? Like, for example, the juego de gallos, no? The cockfights, which are so common in Southeast Asia. But if you ask a Mexican, they will say, "Oh, it's so Mexican. Cockfights is so Mexican." But once you go to Southeast Asia, you understand that it's so Southeast Asian, no? These things, and even in the Caribbean, eh? And again, no, the people that were involved here, we can see different types of people. So who were the people that were involved with this galleon trade, with these galleons crossing the Pacific? No, it's a fascinating story, and this story continues to this day, and the influences of all these material cultures still remain in new ways. No, the shapes of certain objects, the motifs in certain objects, they've been acquired by our cultures and are now something very Mexican or something very Filipino. But their origin is in the galleon, no? And the dresses, no? For example, this is a China Poblana, no? Here's a picture with Dr. Ivan. We were looking at some of the oldest dresses known of a China Poblana, of the last China Poblana of the 19th century in Puebla. And these dresses, of course, is textiles that went through the galleon. They're of Indian origin or Indian cotton. And this is what the China Poblana of today is based on, no? The colorfulness, etc. No? So all these things are still alive. The Manila Galleon is still alive. This is from the National Museum of Anthropology, and they put a very nice thing here because they put a Manila shawl. It's a 18th century, late 18th century Manila shawl, and Oaxaca indigenous Tehuantepec dress. And you can see it's the same flower. It's the same flower, and so the richness of these connections, they're still alive today. No, of course, in our religious sentiments, there's a very big point of that we share. No, and finally, just to wrap it up a little bit, we're preparing an exhibit. Dr. Ivan and myself, we're creating this exhibit in Museum of San Ildefonso for the end of the year. And it's an invitation to visit the exhibit once it's done, hopefully inaugurated by the end of the year. It's called We Are Pacific, no? And if you see the two worlds is America and Asia, no? And Filipinos and Mexicans, we are Pacific, right? So that's kind of the leitmotif, and we hope that you can visit it. And well, thank you very much for listening to all this road of trying to understand the Manila Galleon through archaeology. And if I can help you with any questions that you might have, thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roberto, for that very interesting presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for your questions and comments. Mr. Ignacio, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Buenas noches, Dr. Junco, y muchas gracias por la exposición. Fue muy interesante.
Gracias.
There was just a small detail, a couple of details. They always call my attention when we talk about, especially about the galleon and the construction of the galleons.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that most of the galleons were built actually in Asia. That means in Philippines. I guess certain points, certain bases, perhaps in Manila itself. But it always, yes, it always rings me some alarms that most of the galleons were built there and not, for instance, here in Mexico or even in Spain. Could you, that will be my first question, if you can confirm that. And second, related to the blueprints, the how the let's say the way, the instructions to build the galleon itself. My understanding is that there was nothing like a standardized methodology to build the galleon, if I am correct, and we will not have any until you mentioned it, until the with precisely with this blueprint you mentioned here in your presentation. It was sorry, I forgot it.
Yes. Well, the story is like that. At first, of course, ships are being built in the Pacific here in Mexico, but then again, many of the items that you need to finish a ship, it's not only the wood, right? You also need the iron for the nails. You need the anchors. You need the ropes, and you need the textile for the sails. So you need a whole bunch of things. But of course, the woods are really good in Mexico for building ships. But then specifically, Diego Garcia Palacio, he starts building ships in Central America. And the wood is fantastic there as well. But to get anchors, to get all the iron needed, to get all these things, it's quite expensive. They used to pass it through the isthmus of Tehuantepec from Veracruz, through the rivers, and it made it kind of expensive. Of course, Dr. Ivan can really tell you much more about this, but there's also a component that in the Philippines, besides the great woods that you have, the Chinese iron, which they were bringing into the Philippines even before the Spaniards arrived. It was one of the big trading things, iron. The excellent wood and rope materials that you have. You also had a system, a systematic system of exploitation of the local indigenous communities that had to build for the crown. They had to pay with their work to build a ship. So you have also the part of the human labor in the Philippines. So, but yeah, most of them were built in the Philippines after the 1580s. Just a few cases that were not. I don't know if that answers a little bit your question.
Yes, and now raises more questions, because what I get now is that actually we have better material conditions in Philippines rather than in Mexico, which is also a little bit surprising for me.
Sí, and there's several places where they're building the galleons in the Philippines. Of course, in Cavite and all that, but there's many other places. Sargon, and I don't recall now the names, but there's other places. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Neto.
And about the blueprints, this standardized methodology for
yes. Well, remember that back then, before the Bourbons, in the 16th, 17th century, all these things are more arts, right? We now live in a world where everything has to be measured exactly, where everything needs a blueprint, everything's standardized and everything. But back then, constructing a ship was an art more than a science, right? So, of course, we're also coming from a period where all the knowledge you pass on to your son or to the people close by to you, and you guard this knowledge because it's the way you earn your living. So it's all these craftsman's people passing along the knowledge. And so ships back in the 16th century, they're being built in this sense, with the knowledge that somebody says, oh, well, I think it should be more or less this or that. It's not like, oh, it's going to be 53 centimeters. No. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's more of I think this could work well, and so that's why a good artisan, is a very valuable thing in that period. And yes, these blueprints are published here in Mexico by Diego Garcia Palacio. Interesting first time that they're shown, but not necessarily they're followed by every ship constructed in the Philippines. Then what you have is by the beginning of the 18th century, there you start having more precise um, blueprints, and things get more standardized, and it's more like our times, no? But back then it was more that, oh, I think this could work, let's do it like this. uh, it was more an art than a science.
Very well, doctor. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, doctors.
Thank you, Sir Ignacio, for that question. Do we have other questions from our participants? Dr. Roberto, we do have a comment from the chat group from Mr. Ricardo Jones. He sends his congratulations on your presentation and his appreciation for this episode of La Historia Olvidada. And we do have a question from Mr. Mark Juancho. He would like to ask, in what ways can Manila Galleon archaeology help recover and highlight the cultural contributions of historically overlooked groups?
It's a beautiful question. It's as I told you before, one of the interesting things is what certain indigenous groups, how they interacted with this root, with these materials, and in America and Asia. And maybe the way it helps is just because I'm sure that at first they were very confused. What is this thing that arrived in my backyard in the coast? No, it's a huge mountain of wood, etc. But I think very soon they found out uses for for example, the iron or the wood or some of the materials. And I think that what it can contribute, if we look at this thing, is who were they? Like, who were these indigenous people from Oregon? Who were the indigenous people in California? Because we're finding in the burial grounds in California little pieces of the galleon, or in Baja California here in Mexico as well, these arrowheads made out of Chinese porcelain. So it does help us visualize them and separate them from other indigenous groups, in the sense that they interacted with the root. You have in some of the routers, in the instructions to navigate, we saw fires in the mountains of the indigenous people. So the fact that they get mentioned, or we find these objects in their cultural system, in their culture, it allows us to think about them and to make them visible, to talk about them and who were they and what questions must have they had. And in some cases, they actually had children with the sailors that survived, like in Oregon, no? So you had Indians that had red hair, like probably some Basque sailor or something like that. And then it changed even the genetics of the population. So I think it's interesting in that sense. There could be further things, but I have not thought about them. But it's also something to keep meditating on. And how should disputes over ownership, repatriation, and stewardship of Manila Galleon artifacts be resolved in an ethical and equitable way? Well, I think that we have to recognize that it involves us, the Filipinos, the Mexicans, the Spanish, the Japanese, the Southeast Asian, the people from Tidore and Ternate and several parts of Indonesia, the people from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from China, from India. No, the China Poblana was from India, actually. These textiles that we looked at were from India. So I think if we take this approach that it enriched us all, that it's something that's part of our history, I think there should be no dispute in this sense. It should be a celebration of our cultures and not ownership of it, because in the end, we don't owe anything. Nobody owns anything. It's all part of, we're all humans. So how do we reconcile the competing interests of archaeology, heritage preservation, tourism, national pride, and commercial exploitation? Well, in terms of shipwrecks, commercial exploitation is definitely not recommended. It's never worked well for the cultural objects. There are so many examples of that. We have to do publications, exhibits, conferences, everything to always be talking about these things. And the more we talk about it, the more we touch other people and the more people get interested in these things. So that's part of our compromise to always share with the people the research, the things we're doing. Heritage preservation has to be incorporated into government projects, into civil society projects to preserve. We have to know these things to be able to preserve them. So if we don't know about them, we cannot preserve them. So this is why it's so important to talk about it, because if we talk about it, then people know, and then people tend to preserve, because we all want to preserve culture, our cultures, no? So I think that's a little bit.
Hello?
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Diapera?
Yeah, I was just struck with what you said about some companies doing the excavation. And I think this is related to Mr. Rich's question, because I would think that if a commercial or a private agency or company does the excavation, they would just really focus on the value of the artifacts and not where it was located, how it was found, how we can conserve the goods that we are bringing up to the shore or to the land. So I don't know if there's a way we can really stop this kind of exploitation. And another thing, I forgot the second question. You mentioned. No, I'll try to remember the second question I have, or the second comment I have, but that was what I was thinking. Thank you.
Ambassador, you're completely right. One really nice instrument is the signature of the 2001 convention, UNESCO Convention of the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage, which explicitly says that no commercial endeavors should be taken by governments, because it's proved one time after the other that it just does not work. Because when it is a business, it has to be profitable. So there's no time for looking at small seeds of the foods that were traveling inside those. They are just going to go for the things that are valuable. And so archaeology is not compatible with commercial exploitation. And the 2001 UNESCO Convention is the ideal vehicle for countries and for to follow and to really implement that in each country. And that's why we need to all work together, because sometimes in Mexico we don't have money, but the Americans do. Sometimes in the Philippines you might not have, but the Japanese do. So it depends. We have to all work together to find the resources as countries to work on this thing together without any political ideology, because that gets complicated, and I'm not going to get into all that. But for the good of the heritage, without politics.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good
Thank you,
morning.
Ambassador. Yes, Mr. James?
Sorry, I had difficulty connecting, but Professor, I am struck by the reference to wax in the galleons. I'm wondering if they might have some significance when it comes to religious purposes. That's one. And number two, what would be the in a way religious reasons for all of religious impact of the galleons in both countries where they are exchanging trade as well?
Yes, well, it's a very interesting question that you raise. Yes, the wax could very well be related to the religious orders that the Augustinians are sending the Augustinians in Mexico bunches of wax so that they can use in the church, because maybe it's something that they're collecting in their properties, no? Because like the wax wreck in Oregon, it's huge amounts of wax. It's not for use on board the ship only. It's big blocks of wax, but tons and tons of it. So it could be probably well be related to religious orders that are sending back to their brothers these wax that they themselves produce. And so you see, this is what's so fascinating about the archaeology of the galleons, that opens a lot of questions. If it's you're entering it from another perspective, so all these questions are being raised. And
Last, if I may add more, you referred to the picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
yes,
That's
yes,
something that we are also interested in, particularly in the Philippines, since Our Lady of Guadalupe used to be the principal patroness of the Philippines, but then at some point got changed to someone else. But then, in general, I am a little bit curious about the impact of the galleons to religious development in both countries.
I think, James, you're absolutely right. I mean, our both countries are so religious, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's part of the galleon story. I mean, with Magellan arrives the El Niño de Cebu, no? It's so early, the religion going into the Philippines, no? Even before the galleon is, the route is set up, you already have these religious icons arriving there. Same thing here in Mexico. In this place that I told you about, that where I found the porcelain and the mayolica, there's a Christ that appeared in the beach, right? And he's carrying a cross, etc. So religion just explodes in both places and stays very important in both societies, no? Even though society now is changing and everything, but it's so important because our in the past our life was partially run by the Catholic calendar, for example, no? So you were born in a certain day of certain saint. Oh, but the fiesta of this virgin is coming up, or the ship is gonna depart. We gotta go pray to the Virgin. The whole life of people in society back then was embedded with religion in a very good way. We sometimes overlook how comforting and how what a celebration it was to, oh, the feast of the saint is coming and we got to prepare it. And all society participated, and there was a party and a food and fireworks. I think we overlook sometimes the importance of religion in our society, in Filipino and Mexican society. It was part of life. No, today maybe it's not so much, but before it was totally part of our daily life.
Last question. Was it really mandatory to name the galleons after some saint?
Well, this is a very interesting topic, and I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's part of the fact that you get the Luther, the schism in the church, and this idea that you have to fight against, because if you look at the names of the ships of the English and the Dutch, they have other names, like don't pertain to religion. They pertain to, like, a deer, a golden deer, for example, Francis Drake that went around the globe. They don't use names of saints or anything like that. So we use it because it's part of the counter-reform movement. No, the Baroque in our churches, in our clothing, everything is part of this same thing. The English, we're all dressed in black, and and we're colorful, we're Baroque, and religion, of course, so important. And it's kind of like a counter-reform thing, a cultural thing. If you look at all these Dutch ships, it's another story, the English. I think that's a little bit the thing, and also, well, if you believe in saints, virgins, and God, if your ship's named after a virgin, well, you pray to that virgin that you're gonna get home safely.
Yes.
So it also sounds like that. I don't know. There are all interesting questions, James. We all need to think about all these things many, many, many times.
Thank you, Sir James, for those questions. Dr. Roberto, we do have several questions in the chat box from Miss Seldi Rambao. She is currently working on a research focused on Tornaviaje, from Cebu, Acapulco, and the Astilleros. She was asking if there are some information or maps available about this
Well, yes,
topic.
the researchers at the National Museum of the Philippines have done excellent work on this, finding some of the shipyards, finding objects, tools, and things. Bobby Orillaneda, for example, and a great archaeologist, and many of the great researchers at the National Museum of the Philippines have identified several of the historic shipyards. So it's quite advanced that in the Philippines. Mhm.
Thank you, Dr. Roberto. We do have another question from Jungwon Park. He is
Yes.
asking, in terms of archaeological sense or research, is there anything related to Korea?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked this. Not directly, but this is the fascinating thing about the galleon, that once you start moving, it really is so rich. You know that the Japanese were not very good at doing ceramics in the 16th century, in the 16th century. But all of a sudden, they grabbed some Koreans, they stole some Koreans from their homeland and took them to Japan, and they started making uh, porcelain in Japan. Right in the middle where the Ming Dynasty is falling apart, the production centers in China are completely shut. There's no production of porcelain to export. But the Japanese, they grab these Koreans and they start making very fine porcelain very fast. The Arita, famous Arita porcelain. And they developed, for example, a style called Imari porcelain because of the port of Imari where the porcelain was shipped out. And it's a very beautiful porcelain that's red, blue, gold, and white. And they start exporting this like crazy. And then the Chinese, once the dynasty, the Qing dynasty gets going on and all the workshops begin production for export, they copy the Japanese. And then you have Japanese Imari and Chinese Imari. And all of these went through the galleon, for example. No, so that's just like a link to Korea. We have not had a Korean researcher look at our collection to know if there's like we had a Japanese guy and he actually identified a few shards of Japanese ceramics. So I think the Koreans, maybe they were going through their own dynasty things while the Chinese were on their own. So there was not that big of a connection between Korea and uh, and the Philippines. But if you look indirectly, there's definitely many cases to be found. Mhm.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, we do have a question from Ms. Fatima Araneta. She's asking about the exhibit that you mentioned earlier about We Are Pacific. She would like to ask again as to where the exhibit will be held. And she's also verifying if you mentioned something about San Ildefonso.
Mhm. Yes, the exhibit might be inaugurated the 1st of December, probably. We don't have the exact date at San Ildefonso Museum in Mexico City, and we will try to produce a digital version of the exhibit so that people across the ocean can visit digitally, virtually, and it be 4 months, 5 months open for visit.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Pera?
This is related to what you said about virtual. I thought that you are also planning to do a virtual tour of the museum in Acapulco.
Yes, yes, Ambassador.
Okay.
Because now we have this little program that for doing that we're gonna be doing of both exhibits, hopefully. Mhm.
I hope that you will consider Historia Olvidada as one of the platforms where you will
Yes,
do a presentation of the virtual tour of the Acapulco, because
absolutely.
I know that they have a very rich collection despite the fact that it's very small.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering last time if the typhoon in Acapulco did not affect the museum.
Thank God, no. It resists a lot. invasions of the French and invasions of the
And the
and
store.
Dutch.
Oh,
So no, thank God everything's okay. Yes, we'll try to do the exhibits and maybe we can even do something in the Philippines with this program. You take pictures and everything. We could do a little bit of the National Museum of the Philippines, the area pertaining to the galleon, and we can put it together with the Acapulco. So we can build something that's online, virtual, and that people can visit, and where there's things of the Philippines and of Mexico all together, no? So we can work on something like that, definitely.
w- uh, originally we wanted this talk to be in Spanish, but so that more Mexican students will be able to listen and learn about our shared past. But I hope that at some future time we can have this, I don't translated into Spanish maybe, so that the other countries who speak
Yes.
Spanish can really learn something from the presentations. And
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
very much, because it was really a very interesting discussion that you had.
Thank
And
you. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Really, thank you.
yeah, we're so grateful. Thank you.
No, I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for all your questions and comments. At this point, I would like to request all our participants to kindly indulge us, the Philippine Embassy, with our request to please turn on your camera for a group photo, which we will be posting in our official Facebook page. Okay, is everyone ready? In 3, 2, 1. Let me just go to the next page. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. At this point, I'd like to call on Ms. Marissa R. Winkler, Third Secretary and Vice Consul of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, for the closing remarks. Vice Consul?
Thank you, NJ. Good evening or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today. And we are really grateful to Dr. Hongo for his very interesting and enlightening talk on the Manila Galleon archaeology. Thank you for helping us understand more about the strong ties between Philippines and Mexico. Yes, this episode is really special because it is the last of our ambassador, Her Excellency Lilibet Ardea Pera. She has supported the La Historia Olvidada series since it began in 2023 and helped make this series a success. While this may be her final episode as host, but the series will continue. So we look forward to seeing you in our next episodes, and I hope, of course, the ambassador will join us in the future episodes. Thank you very much. Buen fin de semana. Happy weekend. Hasta luego.
Adiós.
Hasta luego.
Adiós.
Adiós. Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Honko. Thank you, Dr. Ivan.